In this episode, we talk about a train accident in Andhra Pradesh which led to the death of 13 people. We also talk about the effects of being exposed to nitrogen dioxide. But first, we talk about a blast in Kerala. Hi, I'm Rahel, Philipose, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. On Sunday, two low-intensity blasts rocked a convention centre in Kerala's Kalamassery town, which is around 10 kilometers away from Kochi. Now, these blasts occurred during a religious gathering of the Christian group Jehovah's Witnesses, resulting in 3 fatalities and over 50 injuries. And soon after the incident, a man named Dominic Martin walked into a police station claiming that he was responsible for the incident. To know more about this, my colleague Utsa Sarmin speaks to the Indian Express's Narayanan S in this segment.
So Narayanan, can you start by telling us what was happening in the convention center before the blast took place?
Yeah, so this was the third day of this convention. This is a regional convention. The Jehovah's Witnesses, they've been conducting several such conventions for the last few weeks. So the Jehovah's Witnesses, they regularly conduct these meets where they give sermons and they have these religious teachings. All these things happen regularly and they conduct these meetings, these 3-day congregations once in a while. So every morning they have a prayer meet, after 9 o'clock, I think around 9:30. So people were praying when the blast took place. It actually took place in the middle of the convention center. So there were around 2,500 people. So the casualties that happened, as of now, 3 people. They were all seated around the middle, the middle rows of that convention center.
And tell us about the blast itself. You spoke to eyewitnesses, talked about what they saw when the blast occurred.
Yeah, so you can imagine, nobody would expect such a thing happening. So some children or some youth told me that they thought it was some short circuit, and when they saw the fire, the flames, they thought it was some short circuit rather than a blast. Yeah, but then some others said that the sound was such a massive thunderous sound that they were literally taken aback by that sound, and then they had to run out. They had to run for their life. So they saw this fireball and then they had to run out, leaving their bags, their mobile phones, their tiffin boxes. They came to the venue with all their meals for the day packed, and they had to leave all those things at their seat and then had to literally run outside. And you can imagine it got foggy within a few seconds. So even when they got back inside, they couldn't find anything. And by the time these rescue operations had started and the police had cordoned off these places, then they couldn't go inside and get their belongings back.
And could you tell us how the local people and the authorities react? What kinds of measures were taken just after the blast?
Yeah, so the locals immediately rushed to the spot and then the ambulances were called and people were rushed to several hospitals. This happened near the Kalamassery Medical College. The Medical College Hospital in Kochi is at Kalamassery, and this place is hardly 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers away from this medical college. So it was very easy to take these victims to the medical college hospital. So no time was lost in that regard. And then seriously injured people were taken to the private hospitals elsewhere in the city. And by the time I went to the hospitals in the evening, the people who had minor injuries, most of them were discharged. And people who were seriously injured, they were in ICUs, and then some other people in the burn wards.
Right, and Narayanan, hours after the incident, a man in his 50s, Dominic Martin, took responsibility for this. So tell us who Dominic Martin is and what prompted him to take this action.
Yeah, so Dominic Martin is a class 10 fail. He studied only till class 10. So he stays in Ernakulam city. So he stays at a rented apartment with his wife and 2 kids. So he's known as a spoken English teacher. Locally he's known as a spoken English teacher. So he has a history with this religious sect. So he was part of this group for several years, and then 5 or 6 years ago, like he decided that it was enough. He started to believe that their theology is wrong. And they don't believe in national identities. They don't respect national flag.
Right. In fact, in 1986, a family from this community in Kerala had won a verdict in the Supreme Court which upheld their right to not sing the national anthem.
Yes, exactly. So he started to question all these things, and then he came out of the system. And it's very clear that he had very strong opinions about their beliefs, very strong disagreements with what they taught to their disciples. And in the video message, he says that he wanted to prove that their theology is wrong. And for that, he decided to orchestrate this blast. As per his wife's statements to the local people, he left their home at Tamanam early in the morning in his two-wheeler, and he said that he was going to a friend's place, but he actually went to this convention center and triggered the blast. So after that, he surrendered later at a police station. Actually, as per reports, he has already given them the bills of all these materials that he had bought for making this IED. He had given them the bills and everything to prove to the police that he had himself committed the act. So it's very clear that he wants to prove that he is guilty. So if the reports are to be believed, or if we can believe what the police says, he is ready to show the world that he had done the crime. He wants to ensure that the world knows that he is fighting for a cause. He is fighting against this Jehovah's Witnesses for their worldview, and he believes that he is a very nationalistic person and everyone should be nationalistic. So people who follow Jehovah's Witnesses don't have a place in the world. That's what he wants to show to the world. That's what we understand. So it's a very dangerous trend.
Right, and Narayanan, we understand that an all-party meeting was held in Kerala right after the incident, where every party passed a resolution condemning this. Can you tell us what exactly was said in that resolution?
Yeah, so the all-party meeting that happened on Monday, that underlined that you cannot use this incident to paint a community or give a community a villain shade. There were attempts to portray certain communities in a bad light immediately after the event. even some union ministers have made some comments that have since caused some really heavy outrage on social media. So what happened was that the all-party meeting passed a resolution saying that we should not use such attacks to further polarize our society.
And next we talk about an accident in Andhra Pradesh. On Sunday evening, two trains, the Visakhapatnam Rayagada Passenger Special and the Visakhapatnam Palasa Passenger Express, collided in Andhra Pradesh. This collision resulted in the loss of 13 lives and left more than 50 people injured. The incident comes just 5 months after the tragic Coromandel train crash in Odisha, which claimed the lives of 296 individuals. To understand the cause of the recent accident and the concerns it has raised, here is Utsa again speaking to the Indian Express's Sujit Bisoyi in this segment.
So Sujit, we understand that there were 2 passenger trains involved in the accident. Can you tell us what these trains were and what had happened on Sunday evening?
Well, Utsa, both these trains were coming from Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh, and both the trains were local passenger trains. And the first one, which was Visakhapatnam Palasa Express, and another was Visakhapatnam to Rayagada in Odisha. So the collision occurred at around 7:10 p.m. in the evening. When the Palasa bound train was on its way, it was between Kontakpalli and Alamanda station in Andhra Pradesh. The Rayagada bound train that possibly, as far as preliminary investigation are concerned, jumped the signal and hit the Palasa bound train from the rear end. So that led to the derailment of multiple coaches of the second train, the Rayagada bound train.
So the Visakhapatnam Rayagada passenger special train hit the Visakhapatnam Palasa passenger train from the rear end. Now, do we know why these 2 trains were on the same line at the same time? How did this end up happening?
The railway officials are yet to come out with the detailed statement about how both the trains were on the same line. But yes, this Palasa bound train which was going on a very, very low speed. It was almost like crawling when the Raigada bound train came from the back and it rammed into the Palasa bound train from the rear end. And it's not clear yet how both the trains were on the same track. But yes, railway officials are saying that there must be some change of track or something like that. But the Raigada bound train missed the signal and it jumped the signal and rammed into the Palasa bound train.
And you mentioned that the coaches of the Raigada bound train were derailed as an impact of this collision. Could you talk about what was the extent of this impact?
See, after this collision, at least 2 coaches were completely derailed and 2 more were partially derailed. But so far, according to railway officials, 13 persons have so far been killed in the train collision and more than 50 were injured who have been admitted in different hospitals in Andhra Pradesh. Actually, there were more than 200 to 300 people in both the trains, and it was a Sunday, so the number of people who had boarded both the trains were quite low. So, despite being such a major accident, number of casualties are quite low, we can say, and that's the possible reason because it was a Sunday. And since both these trains were covering a short distance, most of daily commuters are, boarding these trains actually.
And could you talk about the rescue operation? When did the relief teams come and how did it go?
So, railway officials started rescue operation within 1 hour of the train collision, and they were helped by the Vizianagaram district administration, the Andhra Pradesh government. Civil administration also helped them, and immediately one rescue team from Bhubaneswar, because the accident occurred under Volunteer Division, which is under the East Coast Railway, which is its headquarters in Bhubaneswar. They sent one rescue team with the equipment, and then 2 teams of NDRF were rushed into. Then Odisha government also sent some of its disaster management forces to help in the rescue operation. So rescued operation almost completed by morning. Then the railway officials started restoration of tracks, which has also been completed by 4 p.m. Monday evening. The tracks have already been restored. It took time because the derailed coaches were cleared. And, the electric lines which were knocked out after this derailment. So everything has been restored now. The Prasanthi Express was the first train to run on had witnessed this collision.
So, Sujit, we understand that the Prime Minister had spoken to Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw about this. Do we know what came out of that conversation?
See, as far as we know, initially their focus was to rescue all the injured passengers and to extend them the required medical help. Then the focus was to restore the track because it was the main line connecting Howrah and Chennai. Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw, yes, of course, he was monitoring the situation in Delhi, as we know from his tweets and orders issued to senior railway officials in the East Coast Railway here. Prime Minister also reviewed the situation. He announced ex gratia of 2 lakh. Then Railway Minister also announced ex gratia of 10 lakh for the next of the kin, the deceased in the incident, and 5 lakh for those who injured.
Right, and do we know if any investigation will be carried out in this matter?
Well, Utsa, in the railway, they have one standard practice. Whenever such things happens, the inquiry is immediately being carried out by the local officials, and then Commissioner Railway Safety will, of course, inquire into the incident after restoration of tracks and everything. So far, no external proof, we can say, has been ordered, but I think Commissioner Railway Safety will start its inquiry in a day or 2.
So, Sujit, this comes just a few months after the tragic Coromandel crash, where around 296 people had died earlier this year. And a lot was said about railway systems after that accident. Now, with this happening soon after, what kind of concern do you think this raises?
Well, after Bhargava train accident, railway took several measures just to avoid such kind of incidents in future. But within 5 months, another incident happened. Though the regions are different, but nature are almost same. In Bhargava, the issue was, there were no human error actually. The issue was with signaling. But in this case, the railway officials are saying that it was a case of human error. The loco pilot of Raigada bound train, it might miss the red signal. And there are apprehensions among people. So I met a few passengers at the Palasa station. Actually, they were scared. They were raising apprehensions about frequent occurrence of this incident, especially in the recent past. Yeah, so we can say there are apprehensions among people. So I think railway will take note of apprehensions of people and take steps to ensure safety of passengers.
And finally, we talk about the findings of an AIIMS study. A recent study by the All India Medical Institute highlights the ill effects of nitrogen dioxide exposure. The study found that the exposure to NO2, even for a short duration, can lead to a considerable increase in the number of emergency room visits. The study is based on the data of 69,400 patients who were brought to the AIIMS emergency department in New Delhi between June 2017 and February 2019. According to the Indian Express's Anonna Dutt, who reports on health and science for the paper, the findings of this study are particularly concerning since NO2 is highly prevalent in the air.
So nitrogen dioxide or NO2 is a very common pollutant. It's released on burning of fossil fuels, which is like every vehicle we have. There are also some industrial processes which release it a bit, but it's like a signature for traffic pollution. So you would see it more in congested areas or areas with heavy traffic, like say the ISBT, where you would have a lot of buses. That's where you will see a higher concentration of NO2.
And Anonna says that high levels of NO2 can have significant health ramifications, including breathing difficulties. She joins us in the segment to talk about the findings of the study and its implications. So Anonna, can you start by explaining what exactly happens when we're exposed to high levels of gaseous pollutants like NO2?
So if you look at the pollutants, we usually always talk about, say, PM10, PM2.5. And for the last few years, we've been tracking the PM2.5 levels because we all now understand that these small particles actually evade our, defense mechanism in the respiratory system, which is like the hair in our nose or the phlegm that is supposed to catch it out. And a lot of the bigger particles, they would not be able to get into our lungs. But these smaller particles do, and they also get into our bloodstreams and affect all the organ systems, everything. And we have been talking about these things, but what we don't talk about are the gaseous pollutants, which is, say, NO2 and ozone, sulfur dioxide. So all of this we don't talk about, but this AIIMS study has actually found that more than PM 2.5, there was a higher increase in emergency department visits when the NO2 pollution levels were higher. And what I was told by the researchers is that NO2 is basically this gas. It's known to cause, when it goes into our lungs, it sort of inflames it, which means there's swelling. Sometimes there's fluid, and all of this then, because the sacs which actually breathe in for us, they get inflamed. They can't really hold on a lot of air. So when there is inflammation, that leads to a lot of breathing difficulty, which means, you would be taking these short, sharp breaths, but you won't be getting as much air in as you would like.
And so, what stands out to you about this study, and why are its findings so concerning?
So why it's concerning for the people like you and me is that we usually track the PM levels on our phone when we are looking at the pollution levels. But the AIIMS study has now shown that exposure to nitrogen dioxide actually led to a 53% increase in the emergency department admissions in the following week. Whereas with PM 2.5, which is more dangerous than, say, PM 10, PM 2.5 led to an increase of 19.5%. So you can see the difference. That's why it's a little concerning.
Right. And which section of the population would be more prone to hospitalization after, increased exposure to NO2?
So two things. What we were talking about till now was emergency department visits. And then sometimes after stabilization, like the basic, taking care of a patient, they also need admission for long-term support, like probably a day or two. So that was seen more in patients who had other comorbidities. Now, this particular study does not record what comorbidity that is, but it's most likely to be, say, a heart condition, kidney condition, or hypertension, diabetes. These are the most common comorbidities. And, we do see every year people who have respiratory illnesses like asthma or COPD, they do come to the hospital. They usually would go back to their treating physician whenever there is high pollution days because their symptoms worsen. But in case of, say, a heart patient, if they reach a hospital with breathing difficulty, that means their, organs are not getting enough oxygen, which means their heart would have to pump over time to ensure that oxygen reaches their organs. and that puts a lot of stress on their heart. So that's why somebody who already has, say, a pre-existing heart condition would be worse off than somebody who doesn't, which is what this study has shown, that, people with these other comorbidities needed more care, more attention, and more support to recover.
And Anonna, what steps can the government take to control NO2 levels?
So NO2, as I said, is majorly from traffic pollution. And the best way to control it is, of course, to control the traffic levels, to have fewer cars running on petrol and diesel, to have cars that are more, efficient so that they release less pollutants. And to be fair, in Delhi, there have been measures that we've been taking for the last few years. There have been experiments with odd and even. There have been experiments on, switching off the car at the signal. There is now the government promoting more electronic vehicles. So all of this is going to factor in. But yes, we have to address traffic problems and traffic congestions mainly to ensure that there's less NO2.
Right. And is there something people can do on a day-to-day basis to protect themselves from NO2 exposure?
So the best way to protecting ourselves from not just NO2 but all sorts of pollution is to not step out on days when the pollution levels are very high. We have worked from home, and so people who can do it should do it during high pollution days. And even when you're stepping out for work or for, other activities, you should ensure that you do that, say, around midday, because pollution levels tend to be higher during the colder time, which is at early morning and then in the evening. So if you do have to step out, try and step out during midday. Other than that, it would be better to, avoid crowded areas. So like we mentioned ISBT earlier, so don't go to an ISBT or an ITO where the traffic level is quite high. If you have a house which is very close to a main street, then you should keep the windows towards the street closed. If you're traveling in a car, roll up the windows. Masking is also something that experts do suggest, but the problem with masks is that it's not 100% effective. First of all, surgical masks do not stop these small pollutants. So you have to wear an N95, which can be difficult to wear for, more than like a very short duration. When it comes to air purifiers, doctors say it might work in, closed environments, especially when you're in your bedroom going off to sleep. If all your windows and doors are closed, you can try and switch on an air purifier, but that's not what they'll suggest for everyone. That's for somebody who already has a lot of respiratory issues and is aware that every season this is what they face.
Right. And are there any other things that stand out for you in the study?
So the study also found that, when there was an increase in carbon monoxide levels, so far we were discussing PM 2.5 and NO2, but when there is an increase in carbon monoxide levels, the study found that it led to a decline in hospital admissions. But we shouldn't be too happy about it. Carbon monoxide is still a very toxic gas. But now there are theories that suggest that it could be anti-inflammatory, which is the reason we see this dip. But when we spoke to the researchers, they said we cannot say that carbon monoxide is really protecting us from the other pollutants, but it does not cause too much harm until a certain threshold is crossed.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. It was written and produced by me, Rahel Philipose, Utsa, Sarmin, and Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.